welcome to the first edition of Lost to Dogs here. Due to the graphic nature of this podcast, we do just want to warn that viewer discretion is advised. Some of the nature of this podcast can be seen as graphic to some audiences, and we are going to be covering topics such as murder and such from there. So Lost Dogs here is going to focus on analyzing the murders, missing cases, and injuries of journalists while they have been in the field and working in the field. We are going to deep dive into their stories that they were covering at the time of their death or going missing, and from there we will take on the ethics of the story itself as well as debrief amongst ourselves. So I'll just start off by introducing myself. My name is John Hayes, and I'll be leading the discussion today.
My name is Dylan Rouse. I'll be joining John Hayes today.
And my name is Christian Tabak. I'll be joining Dylan and John in discussing these matters.
So our first episode here, I really wanted to focus on when murder goes viral. So the virility of murder in journalism. So our first episode today is going to focus on the murders of Alison Parker and Adam Ward. Are either of you familiar with that?
Yes, this is an interesting case.
I remember hearing about this story, but I'm not too familiar about it.
Okay, so we'll just start off by giving some background information here. So our first victim here, Alison Parker, was born in Annapolis, Maryland. She actually grew up in Collinsville, Virginia, and graduated from Martinsville High School at 18. She was a swimmer, won multiple awards in academics, really smart, even participated in robotics. So she started her career in journalism as the news editor of The Breeze. That's going to be the newspaper at the James Madison University School of Media Arts, where she graduated in 2012. So she graduated in 2009 from high school, and then graduated in 2012 from college, so 3 years, really fast. So she interned for the topic of today's story, WDBJ, the CBS affiliate in Roanoke, Virginia, shortly before she graduated, and she basically received a job offer straight out of college from a different station where she joined the news team at WCTI 12, that's going to be in North Carolina. There she served as a news reporter before receiving a job opportunity to go back to WDBJ as a morning reporter in 2014. So she really enjoyed getting to go back to that place that she grew up, and she was 24 at the time of her death there.
Wow.
So Alison's father, Andy Parker, told the Washington Post in an interview following this murder that his grief was unbearable. He asked himself, quote, "Is this real? Am I going to wake up? I am crying my eyes out. I don't know if there was anybody in this world or another father who could be more proud of their daughter." So really heartbreaking words from him. And the next person that's a victim in this story that we're going to go over is Mr. Adam Ward. Adam Ward grew up in Salem, Virginia. Not a lot of info on his achievements growing up, but I do know that he was an athlete, and those who spoke of him said that he wanted to be a sportscaster, so that's pretty relevant today.
Yeah.
He graduated from Virginia Tech with a degree in communications and media studies in 2011, and he started to work at WDBJ as a photojournalist and fill-in sports reporter. Now, at the time of his death, he was actually days away from leaving Virginia and the broadcasting industry in general, so kind of ironic there. He was engaged to be married, an ex-athlete, and his coworkers described him in interviews afterwards as having a joy for life. And the former sports director at WDBJ said in an interview with the Roanoke Times in Virginia that there was no one who came to work wanting to learn more and be engaged. He was 27 at the time of his death, so just 3 years older than Alison there. So to really understand the circumstances behind both of these two's deaths, I really felt that it was important to dive into the mind of the person responsible. I know oftentimes we hate glorifying the people that do these awful acts, but to really understand the impact of this story, we have to dive in here. So I'm going to introduce you all to Vester Lee Flanagan II. He was born in Oakland, California, and earned his degree in radio and television from San Francisco State University in 1995, so much older than both Allison and Adam here. He interned at a local station there before eventually moving on to work in production and as a weekend writer. From 1997 to 1999, he worked as an assignment reporter in Savannah, Georgia, and as a general news reporter in Tallahassee, Florida, 1 year after that. So some of his coworkers, while he was working there, described his behavior as kind of being a diva, like he was all into himself, and said that he was verbally aggressive and verbally abused them every time that a reporter pointed out a mistake in his story or recommended a different camera shot for him to use in his story. So a very violent person. In 2000, he was fired due to the odd behavior that he had and immediately filed a lawsuit that was settled out of court a year later. So flash forward to 2012, and Flanagan is hired as a multimedia journalist, which we all are familiar with, or MMJ, at WDBJ.
That sounds
same
familiar.
station both Parker and Ward are working for at that same time. So the station considered him an experienced reporter at that time, but there were obvious conflicts, again, between the reporters and the photographers and him. Once again, he just wasn't friendly, very verbally aggressive, and not taking criticism well. So some of his coworkers said that he, quote, made them feel uncomfortable or threatened. His behavior continued, and in 2013, you can probably guess what happened next. He is fired again. So some of the newsroom employees even reportedly had to be put in a different room while he was escorted out of the building. He refused to leave, and so police actually had to come and drag him out. So a very messy situation there. Flanagan followed suit with an equal employment opportunity commission complaint against WDBJ, alleging racial discrimination. Yeah, racial discrimination. Somewhere after this incident, Flanagan began to post on both his Facebook and Twitter accounts that he was discriminated against and specifically named both Allison and Adam as employees that were responsible for that discrimination and who made him feel victimized. So he claimed, in fact, that Allison made a racist remark regarding one of his friends, and that Adam actually filed a report to HR against him previously. So he was very upset about that. And we fast forward to the actual incident itself. On August 26th, 2015, Flanagan uploads a video on both his Facebook and Twitter accounts in the first person, showing him walking up to Parker and Ward during an interview with a Miss Vicky Gardner on live television before firing rounds at them, deliberately firing them specifically at Parker, who he was very upset with. So during this incident, Parker and Ward are killed and Gardner is injured. Flanagan proceeds to take his own life hours later after a police chase. So, that's a lot.
I got some questions
That's
for
obviously
you.
a lot. But one little fun fact to point out here is that earlier that morning, ABC News received a 23-page manifesto from Flanagan, and he titled it Suicide Note for Friend and Family. Not Friends and Family, Friend and Family. Flanagan claimed he was inspired by the Charleston church shooting that took place 2 months before this did, and reinforced his fears of workplace discrimination, and he said that this was over being a homosexual black man in the workplace. Now, afterwards here, you can guess that the media was shocked and panicked and didn't really know how to handle this situation. Former President Barack Obama said in an interview to ABC that it breaks his heart every time he has to hear or read about any of these kinds of incidents. Many lawmakers called for gun control, with Allison's father going on to become an advocate on the issue of gun violence as well. Also, some news sites like Think Progress allow viewers to see graphic images of the shooting without warning. Major broadcast companies like CNN and CBS National News share the video on their pages, of which can still be watched to this day. You can actually go online and watch that right now. And the New York Post was criticized for putting up still frames on the incident on their front pages of their newspapers. ABC World News did not air the video. NBC Nightly News showed a still frame from the video, and CBS Evening News showed about 25 seconds of the incident. So there's a lot of debate here over the video, since many are arguing like whether or not the video should have even been put out there in the first place, or whether it's important for videos like this to be viewed. So just interested in hearing some of you guys' feedback on this.
It's a lot to digest, to be honest.
I would say, Christian, you already have some opinions on this. I think you're a little bit more versed in this actual story.
Yeah, this is something I was actually recently going over myself, this incident as it was. One of the things that stuck out to me was, of course, this happened on live TV. The shooting itself was on live TV. So the initial, was already aired. And it's not really, in a situation like that.
Yeah, it's like what the decision that you have to make as a newsroom has to be so immediate in regards to whether or not you show it or cut back the anchor. And I feel like a lot of times people have this like false sense that there is this delay that news organizations can just override and jump back to their studio whenever they need to, when in reality that's not a thing a majority of the time, and they don't have control over showing.
If anything, something like this happens live, it's going to take longer for it to get off the air.
Yeah.
People in production are going to be shocked, and even the producers going like, back to the studio, so it might not be fast enough to go because they're in shock.
Exactly.
Yeah. As far as an interesting thing about, including these videos on news sites and postings and everything, I'm not sure what y'all's opinion are. For me, I think it's something that definitely on highlighting, the significance of these events, such as, whether it be shooting or the dangers that come with journalism. I think inclusion of it is a good thing with adequate, warning ahead of time.
Yeah.
They mentioned Think Progress didn't have any kind of warnings, just going into it. It's something you need to have, be sensitive about.
Exactly.
But I think the decision that several organizations went to about actually, including this, it's and especially today when things are so maybe inundated with shootings here and there, actually making it more real by including it, I think is something that's, makes it more of a real situation to talk about and actually start conversations.
And it's a hard call to make as a news industry. Like, you really have to sit down and think about whether or not this content is newsworthy, whether or not the public has a right to know it. Like, these decisions are made every day, and especially when it involves you, like your news station and your reporter. Like, I don't want to be the news director that has to make that decision. And I think that everyone handled it that day as best as they possibly could. I can't say the same for what has gone forward. Like, just to play devil's advocate here, I feel like some of the content has been put out kind of glorifies the incident in a way, but then you kind of balance along that teetering line of, do we show this content because it's important to understand what journalists go through, or do we not show this content because it could potentially glorify the person that did it?
Well, it's just that, and I also have a question for you. Have you seen the videos and clips that you were talking about that were shown by like MSNBC and ABC and such like that?
Yeah.
Do any of those videos actually, or clips, show the actual murder itself? Or are they showing like moments leading up to it, or the aftermath of it? Do they show the dead bodies at all?
Good question. We won't actually be playing the clip for you all today, but the moments leading up to both Alison and Adam being killed are caught on camera. The camera quickly pans away right before we actually see anything occur, but we can hear the screams of all the victims that are involved.
I assume the gunfire as well.
And the gunfire as well.
And in the case, because word was shot first, you see the camera drop, and it's a moment of what's going on.
Panic, yeah.
Yeah. And perhaps not graphic immediately, as if but anyone's watching is going to know, and to include that is perhaps a question.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's also important detail showing, like, this subject is, of course, danger that journalists are put in.
Yeah.
I think with that kind of material, it would be okay showing the moments leading up to it, as I'm sure a lot of the news organizations did, or if they disagreed, they show a still of the moment right before. But any of the actual murder itself or the aftermath just seems a little unethical.
Yeah, I agree in that sense. And, like, just kind of to play devil's advocate again, like, a part of me, as much as I know that this video could help people and be important in informing individuals about the traumatic events that journalists go through, a part of me also has to question the ethical lines of if this video is causing more harm to the families involved than is needed.
Well, and I think the actual aftermath proved exactly that, with the way it went viral on social media, and just the way Alison's father has talked about, the impact, and the way that, sites such as Google, YouTube, and everyone just kind of, not necessarily allowed, but for his expression of disappointment at their lack of prosecuting and making sure these videos aren't played, it shows exactly that. On the one hand, from a journalism perspective, I definitely think it's something to be aired, but unfortunately, like you said, it does kind of prove there's that habit of it does more harm than good potentially.
Well, also, unfortunately, the video itself was live, so it can be clipped and has been spread around the internet itself. So, I mean, it's not up to just the news stations if it's shown or not. It's already out there and being viewed by millions of people.
Yeah, it is out there. So, kind of transitioning away from that, this actually happened this year that this process continued. This lawsuit was actually filed in 2017, I believe, but then got renewed in 2019 after negotiations were settled. So, a victim of this shooting, Miss Vicky Gardner, who is being interviewed by Alison and Adam, actually survived the shooting and is now suing WDBJ7, and she's seeking $6 million in damages. Wow. She's citing negligence in the station's hiring process and saying that nothing like this should have happened. What do you guys feel about that? Do you feel like that's fair of her? Or?
I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure I don't know. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm pretty sure the station didn't shoot them. But at the same time, I do think that it is a good point for WBJ7 to bring up in their hiring process, because clearly, his name was Flanagan?
Yeah.
Had some mental illness issues going on. I mean, nobody just wakes up in the morning and just does this. And like you said in the beginning, there was a lot of telltale signs about him being a little unstable and having to be removed from the workplace. But I don't know if the suit will pass, because it's not the station's fault about the shooting or the fact that it was live and then can be shown.
Exactly. I understand the concern, red flags, obviously the station didn't pick up on, or perhaps didn't, catch on soon enough that something like this could potentially happen. I don't know if the station should necessarily be held culpable, at the state of a lawsuit, but I do understand, this something like this does when it comes to hiring practice and everything. I don't know necessarily this is something we talk about in journalism, is screening these things, because it's not something we have a precedent of, is rampaging, journalists.
Exactly. And just a little bit of a happier note to cushion all of this, guys.
There's a happy note.
So, the news reporter, Alison Parker here, actually had a boyfriend who worked at the station as well. So, he was an anchor at the station and has since gone on to being a delegate and advocating for gun reform and gun control across the country. So I thought that was really important to bring up there. His name is Chris Hurst, and he is definitely working on improving gun control. Do we feel like his actions are justified there? Do we commend him for moving out of the news industry and shifting into politics?
Well, I mean, it's always great to just have somebody be an advocate, no matter what profession they leave from to become an advocate. But I don't know, gun rights, that's a blurry area.
It's
I mean, congratulations for him being an advocate, though, and moving on to something he believes in.
Yeah. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. Make sure to give us a follow on Twitter at Lost Dogs Pod, or like us on Facebook at Lost Dogs Podcast. And if you have any story ideas, be sure to send them to lostdogsok@gmail.com. That's it for this episode of Lost Dogs. We'll see you all next time.